Recording. Session is recording now. Today, we're going to talk about confined space. All right, let's see how far we can push this one here. All right. This is by no means, it's not like an official training. I can't give you one size fits all because when it comes to this type of safety training, the situation changes from year to year, and it also might change from one place to another. Okay, the purpose of this of this class is that you get some sort of awareness that something like that exists. And the only thing I can give you now is just give you some common sense points that are supported by some sort of official literature that I can that could extract from one place or another. Okay, so I didn't realize. Okay. Yeah, I was just looking at the chat lines here. Yeah, you guys are all correct. Yeah. Okay. All right. So. Confined space. Now, let's just take a quick look at this picture because this has to do with the next slide. So I just want you to get some terminology down path. All right, so over here we have some sort of a concrete mixing facility. So this big container here with the cone-shaped opening, that's called a hopper. And over here, the area that you can walk on, it is called a catwalk. Okay, so that has to do with the next slide. All right, now we're going to take a quick case study. All right, now sometimes you're going to see, well, depending on how many people are rolling in, the Zoom sessions, the Zoom server is assigning bandwidth, and the more people log in, the more blurry things might seem as the end result. But you're going to have this whole presentation available in PDF for download under our class portal, okay, in the contents just as usual. All right, so case study here. While workers were uploading a sand from a cement mixing hopper, remember the hopper? That's right here, okay? The material became stuck and stopped dumping into the container. A worker walked along a nearby catwalk with a 7-foot pole, intending to dislodge the sand. Once the worker was near the hopper, he was out of the view of other employees. The top of the hopper was open, and while there was no designated entry point, the hopper was accessible from the catwalk. Okay, at some point, the worker entered the hopper. Because no one could see him, no one knows whether he accidentally slipped or if he entered the hopper voluntarily. When the sand became dislodged and began moving again, coworkers saw the 7-foot fall out of the bottom of the hopper with the sand. They were unable to locate the worker on site and realized he must have fallen into the hopper. Eventually, rescuers extracted the worker from the bottom of the hopper and administered CPR, but unfortunately he succumbed to his injuries a short time later. Okay, sad story. Can we continue it? Key takeaway from this case study: the worker entered the hopper without a confined space plan and without proper training. The open hopper should have been guarded or sealed to prevent unauthorized or accidental entry. A simple grate or barricade over the hopper could have prevented his death. Okay, so here is the case study that we just took a look at, and here's the source of that. You will be able to click on this once you download the PDF version of this presentation here. All right, now, what is a confined space? it's not just a hole in the ground that you can fall in and not be able to get out of. Things are a little bit more complicated. All right, a confined space is a space that is large enough for a person to enter and work, right, excuse me, has limited or restricted means of entry and exit, and it's not designed for continuous occupancy. Ontario Regulation 632-/05 defines it as confined space. Yeah, there's a train. Confined space means a fully or partially enclosed space and subject to A, that is not both designed and constructed for continuous human occupancy, and B, in which atmospheric hazards might occur because of its construction or location or content or because of work that is done in it. So that's the some definitions when it comes to Thomas. No, Thomas sounds different. It sounds like hoo, you know, this one is something I can't even repeat that. All right, yeah, we have some trains going in the background. Okay, now then from that we go to something that's called a permit required confined space, and we're going to take a look at a little bit more details when it comes to that in the next couple of slides. Permit required confined space has at least one of the following characteristics. It contains or has the potential to contain hazardous atmosphere, contains a material that has the potential to engulf an entrant. Engulf means just basically overwhelm with either solids or liquids. Has an internal configuration such as an entrant could be trapped or asphyxiated. Asphyxiated means basically not being able to breathe or dying because not being able to breathe. Or contains any other recognized serious safety and health hazard. So that's something that's called a permit required confined space. Now, what is an entry permit system? As I go with the slides, yes, I do read through those. Now, an entry permit is an administrative tool used to document the completion of a hazard assessment for each confined space entry. Some fully trained and experienced in confined space work should be complete. Should complete the entry permit. Right? Some jurisdictions require a permit for all confined space entries. So there you go. Depending on where you are, on whatever the law of the land is, you should be able to. You should familiarize yourself with the way things are done in your area. Okay. Now. An entry permit is required for confined spaces where the hazard and risk assessment determines that the measures to control the risk involve the following. Okay, so when the space that you're entering, it requires atmospheric monitoring. So basically, the air quality has to be checked. If it requires an isolation, so people, not just anybody can walk in. If it requires a lockout, so to prevent people from walking in, and ventilation, if it requires ventilation, safeguarding devices such as rails or barriers, and respiratory protection, or any other control that requires by the risk assessment to be verified by a permit. All right, here's some more reading here, guys. Get a good coffee. All right. Before entering a confined space, an entry permit should be completed. So basically, what this whole thing is talking about is that if you have to work in a confined space, you are required to complete certain documentation that applies or that has to comply with the area that you're working in and the laws of the land that you're in. So before entering a confined space, an entry permit should be completed. It should contain um, at least the following information. All right. So in that permit, there should be included the length of the permit that it's valid for, the names of the workers that are enter the space, the names of the attendants and safety watch and or supervisors, the location and description of the confined space, the scope of work that needs to be done, possible hazards that might be encountered inside and outside of the space, possible hazards that might develop during the work activity. So see, we're getting some detailed descriptions of what needs to be done. Now the whole thing is based on the human race experience that basically, unfortunately, it was probably because of the experiential span of accidents. Okay? Now, let's keep going. The details of the atmospheric testing can be done in confined space when the results equipment. So that has to do with the details of the air quality. Hazard control measure includes including the mechanical ventilation and other protective equipment. So things are going into quite a detail. Means of communication between the persons working in the confined space and the attendant. Emergency plan if something goes wrong. Okay, so and the protective equipment and emergency equipment to be used by any person who takes part in rescue or response to the other to other emergency situations in the confined space, and a signature of a worker who did the confined space air testing. So yeah, those things, yes, they're quite detailed before work needs to be done, and it's the purpose of that is basically to prevent death. Okay. So authorization, blah blah blah. Okay, so I can read that. I might ask you some questions that have to do with that. The entry permit should be posted at the confined space and remain so until the work is complete. The employer should keep a copy of the of the completed permit on file. All right. Now, some definitions. What is a hazard? A hazard is something that can cause harm. For example, toxic gases. Okay? Risk, the relationship with the hazard and between the hazard and the risk. A risk is a chance that the hazard will cause the harm. High or low risk of asphyxiation. Okay, and remember, asphyxiation is death by not being able to breathe. Okay, so now let's keep going. Now, confined space hazards. The hazards might include oxygen deficiency. Okay? So again, we're looking at the hazards, and hazard is something that can cause harm. Okay. Now, it could be oxygen deficiency, flammable combustible gases and vapors, toxic gases, engulfment in solid or liquid, high noise level. That's also it actually could be deadly or can cause death by being not being able to pay attention to some signals. Grinding, crushing, or mixing mechanisms, configuration. We'll take a look at what the configuration means. Basically, it's the way the equipment is arranged in the, let's say, room. That if you enter that room, there could be some working machinery with moving parts that can cause you harm. All right, extreme temperatures that can kill you, chemicals or lack of lighting. So these are the hazards, confined space hazards. Now, over here, well, see when we talked about something that's called engulfment. Where do we have that here? Engulfment in liquid or solid. What do we see here? This is an outside of a silo, okay? And then there will be the inside of this silo here, okay? Now, when we talk about engulfment, what can happen to this person? Whatever that solid matter is probably some sort of dirt. What can happen? Yeah, it's basically like a quicksand. Okay, that sand can basically inhale that person. Or yes, this person can get swallowed by it. Thank you, chat lines. Thank you, Mason. All right, and thank you, Jacob. Now, all right, so this is what engulfment means. Now, if somebody drowns in some liquid, that will be also engulfment by liquid, and it will be engulfed. This here example is an engulfment by solids. Now, this picture over here, I'm not sure if you can see it clearly or not. You'll be able, once you download this PDF version of this, this would be the configuration. Let's see, we go back here. All right, hazards. A configuration could be hazardous. Okay. Now, this configuration here, there will be loud and a lot of moving parts. So you basically have to be careful and follow some procedures when it comes to moving around equipment that has moving parts, and that can harm you. Now, obviously, this confined space, this space is considered to be a confined space because it is not designed for a constant human occupancy. This thing is working, and it's supposed to do its work, and the door is locked. Nobody is usually supposed to go in there unless for some extenuating circumstances. All right. Now, you see, when I was talking to you about confined space, it's not necessarily a hole in the ground that you can fall in and not being able to get out of, okay? This also is considered a confined space. It is fenced out. Now, let's just take a look at this thing here. This reserve pit is a permit-required confined space because of its potential to contain hazardous atmosphere. So you know what? When you first took a look at this thing, there will be a potential of engulfment. Yes, there is a potential of engulfment. Someone can fall in and drown. However, something that might be overlooked is we don't know. I don't know. This could be some chemicals here, hazardous chemicals, and of course, it could cause some vapors. So even if you're standing here on the shore, on the edge of this shore, on the edge of this confined space, right by the fence, on the inside of this space, you can be overwhelmed by the hazardous gases that will be vaporized from this pit, and you can basically faint and fall in. All right, so it is considered as a confined space. All right. This example of a permit-required confined space. Well, there's a single point of entry, and obviously this is not somebody's office that somebody goes in the morning 9 to 5 and produces some paperwork inside of this space. This this yeah. This will be a confined space because it's a limited entry. You only enter that space if it's absolutely required. All right. So always follow the company permit procedures, even if you are doing it just for a second. It doesn't take long to kill us. Okay, we're humans. We are fragile beings. All right, now let's say here this confined space might be oxygen deficient or contain flammable or combustible or toxic gases or vapors. All right, now test the atmosphere if, okay, hold on, test the atmosphere in this order: oxygen content, then flammables, then toxics, and then other hazards. Okay, now notice this person here is wearing a fully enclosed face protection. So when that person breathes, he doesn't breathe anything that's basically inside that confined space. He's getting an enclosed breathing system here. Okay, so basically, just so we know, just having a regular mask that that we wear over our faces, okay, then we go to school, that might help to prevent the possibility of us getting infected by the influenza virus, or the purpose of that we're working with this now is the COVID But if there are toxic gases in the confined space, that thing is not going to help you. Okay, so appropriate PPE should be used, and the documentation should be reviewed, and procedures should be followed. Okay. All right, let's keep going here. Test the atmosphere, the atmosphere at all levels of the confined space. Good air near the opening doesn't mean that there is good air at the bottom of whatever that confined space is. And this would be an example of a testing device that would indicate good air, poor air, or deadly air. Now, there are, this is not something that one size fits all. Of course, there would be designated equipment according to where you are and what you're supposed to do. All right, confined spaces. Okay, so you can click on that. There's once you download this, you can click on this YouTube link, and that's going to give you a little bit more detail on as far as air monitoring in confined spaces is involved. I might ask you questions that have to do with this suggested video as well. All right, and there's another video here. All right, now another example here. Excuse me, the atmosphere inside a confined space might not be suitable for entry. So then again, forced air ventilation might be used, but you are not permitted to enter onto the atmosphere is suitable. So depending, there's no one situation for all. Depending on what you're dealing with, appropriate PPE and procedures, PPE should be used and procedures should be followed, okay? Atmospheric conditions might change while you are in the confined space, so you have to constantly and periodically monitor the atmosphere within the confined space. Okay. All right. Now, here's the one that says get out. All right. And somebody just got out, so thank you. All right. If a hazardous atmosphere is detected while a worker is in a confined space, all activities should stop. The worker or workers should exit immediately. The hazard should be evaluated and protective measures should be taken. Now, there was, I'm thinking about some 20 years ago, there was that news, it was all over the news, the free press and radio and TV. Somewhere in London downtown where we are here, there would be a couple workers that needed to enter some confined space where there would be some hazardous gases in there. Now, this is how quickly things can happen. Somebody opened the hatch without the proper PPE. As soon as they opened the hatch, the vapors got out, overwhelmed that person instantly. The person fell in, and that was pretty much it. So, that's how quick sometimes things can happen, okay? Unfortunately. All right, now, if a worker must wear a respirator, remember that an air purifying respirator will do nothing in an oxygen deficient atmosphere. Just as I was saying, if there is no oxygen to breathe, that little mask or non-medical or even an N95 mask, which is basically a dust protector, it's not going to create oxygen for you to breathe. So if there is no oxygen, no matter what dust covering equipment you're going to use, you're not going to be able to breathe. Okay? These workers are wearing air supplying respirators due to lack of oxygen. Okay, so they're wearing fully enclosed system that is enabling them to breathe. Okay, let's say can't purify air. Yeah, that's right. Okay, can't purify air that is not there. All right. All right. Adequate illumination should be provided. Where lighting is limited. In some cases, explosion-proof lighting might be necessary. All right, so not only you need to have adequate lighting, but depending on what is in the air, there could be some explosive fumes in the air, and the concentration of the explosive fumes in the air might be just enough to ignite with the spark that is provided by the bounce of a switch. In some of your classes, you might study something that's called a bounceless switch operation, or debouncing the switch. Every time the switch closes, there is a metal contact, and because of the proximity of the conductive materials, a little tiny spark might occur, and this could be just enough to cause, excuse me, an explosion. All right. Same thing here when you enter a house, like let's say you were out for a trip and maybe there was a gas leak in your house. You enter the house, your house, and you smell gas. Try not to turn the light on until you actually know that there is no explosion hazard. As soon as you smell gas, do not turn on the light. Okay. So when when that happens, it's your house could have the characteristics of confined space. Although your house is not a confined space, unless you're in a house arrest, but that's a completely different story. Okay. All right, some confined spaces might contain mixing or crushing mechanisms or other hazards that can be turned on and injure. Okay, well, let me read this again. Some confined spaces can contain mixing or crushing mechanisms or other hazards that can be turned on and injure a worker. So we're talking about configuration here. Right? Use a lockout, tag out, on, or tag out. So lockout or tag out on all hazardous items. You see, here's the confined space. Here's an entry to that. And there would be some levers or switches that are used to operate whatever needs to be operated in there. So lockouts should be used in some cases, but in most cases, in this particular case, an attendant would be required. So attendant is a person who is watching the procedure and watching for anything that can go wrong. Attendant is not supposed to go in the confined space pretty much almost at any circumstances, because even if there is something is happening due to, like, for example, toxic gases, and if you can see somebody who's being overwhelmed there, if that attendant goes in, that person also is going to be pretty much overwhelmed by the toxic gases. So we'll be talking about the duties of an attendant when it comes to confined space in the next few slides. Here's the next slide. Duties of an attendant. Okay, so the attendant is supposed to know. So the attendant is a person, as we said, a person who is basically overlooking the whole operation. Right? That person is not supposed to walk in there. It's just supposed to make sure that nothing happens to that person, or making sure that nothing happens, and basically watch for any other circumstances that might arise that could put the person in danger. Like, for example, somebody from outside could come in and say, why is this thing not working? Can we still turn this on? No, we cannot turn this on because somebody is working there. Get out, okay, and come back later. All right, so duties of an attendant. Light a smoke. Yeah, light a smoke. Yeah, so I see a chat from Jacob. Yeah, if you enter the house, you smell gas, do not turn on the light, just light the smoke. No, don't do that, okay? Now, duties of an attendant. The attendant knows the hazards, maintains an accurate count of attendants. So whoever comes in, the same amount of people should come out. That's pretty much obvious. Remains outside the permit space until relieved by another attendant, and there will be a proper relieving procedure for the attendants to be changed if the operation takes longer. Maintains regular communication with the entrance and monitors the conditions inside and outside of the permit space. There was that series on TV, some kind of like reality shows or whatever it was. The people would just go down in the underwater diving and looking for gold with some suction device. Do you remember when in all cases there was a constant communication? That person that will be on top, monitoring the ventilation system. Um, like that person would constantly carry a conversation with the person who is down below, and they will be watching for signs. If that person starts to make no sense when they're talking, maybe they're oxygen deprived or something. So any kind of signs, they will be talking sometimes about whatever topics just to maintain the conversation. Okay. All right. So let's keep going. Duties of an attendant continued. Now, the attendant is supposed to summon or get rescue services when needed. The person ensures unauthorized persons or personnel do not enter the permit space or affect the operations. Okay. Duty attendant is supposed to perform non-entry rescues for the I'm looking at the chats here. Okay. Does an oxygen deprivation cause brain damage? Would they want to like know that there are already oxygen probably deprived? Oh, that would be for the attendant. For the attendant to figure out or determine. Okay, so when the person is talking, the attendant is talking to the person that's inside a confined space. If there is any odd behavior by that person, then there will be some cause. There will be some situation to cause some sort of alarm. Okay. All right. So the duty attendant performs non-entry rescues, and the reason for that non-entry is that, as we talked about, if there is some hazardous air or anything that is hazardous and it did something to that person inside, then if that attendant walks in there, then they will be overwhelmed by the same thing, and there will be nobody to rescue both of them. Okay. Now, performs no other duties. Duties of attendant. Attendant performs no other duties that might interfere with the primary duty to monitor and protect the entrance. You can't have a conversation with somebody. You can't have texting on the phone. You are the watchdog of the whole operation if you're an attendant, and your only concern is what's happening inside that confined space, and are people in danger or not. All right, I'm going to keep going with this. Now, if possible, for a worker to be overcome by a sudden change in atmospheric conditions, ensure that the rescue procedure is in place in case an entrant needs to be removed from a confined space. So not only the hazards and the risks should be assessed before that, but there should be a plan that everybody knows what to do in case something goes wrong. So there is no panic and nobody has to figure things out. Again, the reason for us to sort of give you this sort of information is it's not to make you an expert on confined space, because you would need some official and additional training depending on what type of hazards you're dealing with, and depending on where you are, and depending on when this thing is happening, because 2 years, there could be some new, in 2 years from now, there could be some new rules and regulations that apply to that. Now, the reason for this whole thing is that you can actually recognize hazardous situations, and basically just prevent yourself from walking into those situations. A simple thing, and it was not even considered a confined space. It could be other hazards that are in a workspace, in a workplace. For example, years ago, you're talking about, I don't know, 25 years ago, I was supposed to mount some things in the ceiling, and the ceiling had something that's called MMF, which is called man-made mineral fiber. It's a type of insulation. It's a spray-on insulation that that basically acts as an insulation. It looks like somebody sprayed dry gray mud onto the ceiling. And I was supposed to remove some of that and drill some anchors into the ceiling. Now, 25 years ago, I was new and young in the environment, and I just grab a ladder and get my drills, and I get stopped by one of the people who were on site. I was the supervisor. And he said, well, I think you should look at this literature and get back to me, but don't do the work before you read this. And basically what I found out, that this thing is called a man-made mineral fiber, which is extremely hazardous to your health, just like the asbestos. It doesn't cause immediate death, but it could actually harm you later, just like asbestos can. So after reading that, I just packed my tools and left the site. Now, in some cases, you might be asked to do some sort of duties that could be a little dodgy. So if your boss is asking you to do something, you should be able to recognize a confined space. All right, now that was not confined space, but there was some danger. Of course, I could get fired for not performing my duties, but then again, I couldn't be fired for that because I was asked to do something that is held hazardous without being informed and without getting a proper documentation on what I'm working with. So yeah, well, I couldn't be fired for that, and I'm glad I walked off that site, because I would be contaminated with things that are just as dangerous as asbestos is. Okay, another situation about similar time I had, we had to enter one of the recreational facilities underneath a swimming pool, and as soon as I came close to that entrance for the space that was underneath the swimming pool, an overwhelming smell of chlorine I felt. Here's the Yoda language. Right? So I didn't get in there because I'm not sure if I entered there, I'm not sure if I'll be able to come out, or if I came out, my lungs would be burned to the point that maybe I would have some permanent damage. Okay, so sometimes you might be asked to perform some duties that are dangerous. I want you to get your radars onto that kind of stuff, and if you see something that could be considered a confined space, just back away, just to be on the safe side, and ask some detailed questions that have to do with this lesson that we're having, that have to do with confined space. Okay? All right, let's see here. All right, additional concerns that have to do with the confined space. Noise. Noise is another thing. Amplified due to acoustics of the space. Okay, so noise can be amplified due to the acoustics of the space, damages hearing, and affects communication. Well, it's just like putting a head in a barrel and somebody bangs the barrel with a hammer. The noise is going to be amplified because of the structure of the construction of the barrel, right? So a proper hearing protection should be used, and that is not only those earplugs. Those earplugs will protect your eardrums to some point, but quite often you're going to require complete earmuffs, so that cover your whole ear, not just the entry point to your ear. simply because different frequencies. So this little ear plug, that rubbery kind of expandable ear plug, it might help, it might prevent some high frequencies to get into your ear. But when there's some lower frequencies, enough noise, the sound can get not just through that, but they can get through the structure around your ear. So that's why in some cases you should have a full ear covered with the proper protective, hearing protective ear muffs. Okay. Additional concerns: slippery or wet surfaces that can cause increased risk of falls and electrical shock. Right? Now, additional concerns: personal protective equipment, more common PPE such as hard hat, hard-toed boots. Now, I just said hard-toed boots because I don't want to say steel-toed boots, because the technology that has to do with developing the foot protection has moved on. Sometimes you get steel toes, sometimes you get carbon fiber, as long as the proper documentation is or the specifications are met, and the work boot actually fulfills the requirements. It doesn't have to be steel toe, it could be carbon fiber. They're much lighter, but they also are allowed for us to work with. Okay, so hard-toed boots, safety glasses, face shield, gloves, and overalls must be worn when needed. Okay, now hot work. Okay, and it could be a hot, heat also can affect your performance and the ability to function, and it could be overwhelmed by heat as well. Okay, so we've gone over some slides that have to do with confined space. We're going to continue with this tomorrow, as I said, this is not to make you an expert or safety officer. This is for you to be aware of some potential health hazards that have to do with confined space or areas similar to that. Just like I said, I gave you the example of a house. You go for a trip, you come back, you smell gas. All of a sudden, the house just became a confined space, treated as such. All right. Okay, yeah, so we're going to continue with this. Don't forget, the test is active only until the end of the day on Sunday, and it's like 11:59 p.m. this Sunday. So 1 minute before midnight, the test closes. Please do not ask for extension, because obviously you had enough time to do this. And I can see people are doing the test, marks are rolling in, so I'm happy about that. Just please don't let that slip by you, because this test is worth something here. It's not just 5%. What's this test worth? Yeah, this test is worth 15% of your marks, so please do not let that slip. Okay. Yeah, I can see the chat here. Mine, Jonathan says my boots are composite toe, same idea, different material. Yeah, those materials are, as long as it's approved, CCA approved, CSA, CCA, CSA approved. Where we are here, we are dealing with CSA. Okay. Okay. So I will. Yeah, the good old green and orange patch. Yes, for the safety boots when it comes to that. All right, guys. I will see you tomorrow. And if you have any questions, concerns, or whatever else, by all means, send me an email. Except, don't ask for extensions on the test. Right? That's the only thing that I'm not gonna, unless there's some really extenuating circumstances. But for the most part, they won't be. Okay. All right, guys. I'll see you tomorrow, and stay healthy and safe. Okay. Bye. Thank you.